send text in. AI says, okay, play it.
Sing it with me, I really like NVIDIA.
Make you like me best, yeah. Sing it with me, I really like NVIDIA.
Artificial intelligence at 60 frames a second. AI.
We think about artificial intelligence.
The result this time, ChatGPT. Wish me luck.
Really sparked a revolution.
Papa's. This is too much.
The RTX 4060 Ti. The RTX 4060 Ti is the best GPU. What?
None of that conversation was scripted.
Time.
This processor delivers on the promise of power efficiency.
The more you buy, the more you save.
Thanks, Steve.
Who's looking forward to Starfield?
Delivering great performance for Intel. All about AI.
All of you are deep within it and you feel it. I wonder if this can play Crisis.
Crisis.
Only gamers know that joke.
We brought you this video with the new limited edition 2023 Disappointment PC t-shirt on store.gamersnexus.net. These special shirts feature all the most disappointing dates of the year on the back of the shirt, like a tour of perpetual disappointment. And for the first time in a few years, despite rising costs, we were able to get the price as low as $20 for the cotton t-shirt, which is accompanied by a charcoal heather counterpart. The back of the shirt features a 2D representation of memory architecture, positioned like a spine down the back center of the shirt for something anatomically accurate if you were, in fact, AI. This hand-designed shirt has GPU and system memory scattered around the dates on the back, and on the front you can find an explosion diagram of a memory module, and we used it because we'd really like to forget 2023. So naturally, we permanently commemorated it with this design. The best way to support Gamers Nexus in 2024 and its continual investment into educational content like our videos showing how parts are made is to grab one of these limited shirts while they last on store.gamersnexus.net. You know, Intel CEO Pat Gelsinger really said it best.
Wow, what a year.
There were a lot of positives this year, like actually an incredibly competitive air cooler market that's gotten cheap, a burgeoning handheld market with really innovative options that we're working on reviewing right now. The 7800X 3D was one of the best possible CPUs to have come out. The efficiency is crazy. But there were also some really bad products this year, and that's what this video is focused on. We already made 3 separate videos about the best products of the year. first of all, CPUs that were melting or exploding within the socket of the motherboard. Product itself, not bad. Event, pretty bad. ASUS's Ally, another situation of this where the micro SD card would just stop working. Ours actually was one of the victims of that. And then, of course, we have GPUs, everyone's favorite, with things like the 4060 Ti, the 16 gigabyte model marketed for 1080p gaming while costing $500, which is completely insane because they heard you wanted extra VRAM or something. So here you go, leave us alone now. And then, of course, snake oil. But let's start with the GPUs. We start the recap with one of the biggest marketing lies of the year. And it's not the part where he said Ti and Ti in the same sentence.
The RTX 4070 Ti delivers up to 3 times the performance of our previous flagship GPU, the 3090 Ti.
That's right, the 4070 Ti, now announced a full year ago in January last year, was supposed to be 3 times a 3090 Ti. But that's not all.
Up to twice as fast as a PlayStation 5, but 1/6 the size.
So between being 3 times a 3090 Ti and better than a $500 console, NVIDIA certainly set mixed expectations for its $800 GPU. This bad boy can fit 2 4070 Ti's. They are completely, absolutely insane. The card really set the tone for the rest of the year as GPU manufacturers had to come to grips with the fact that the COVID market had ended. No longer could they just ship anything to market and have it sell instantaneously and then get scalped on top of that. But that wasn't the only marketing behind the 4070 Ti. NVIDIA also had a weird slide comparing laptop inches to years to performance, creating some sort of 4-dimensional self-collapsing tesseract of bullshit. It's hard to recap it properly a year later and do it justice, so here's a reminder. But there's good news. NVIDIA's chart here shows us that not only is it January 3rd ADA, but in the year of ADA, 14-inch performance over time, a new metric indicated by the y-axis, increased by 20 times. That's right, and because inches are a linear metric in this inch performance over time chart, having that 20x multiplier means that 1 inch in the year of ADA, formerly known as the year 2023, is equivalent to 20 inches. It's all very unfortunate considering how impressive the 4090 was for performance compared to prior generations. The 3080 really set the expectation high for value when it launched, where it felt like a true successor to the 1080 Ti. But the 40 series unfortunately reset the clock and made it feel like it was back to the 20 series in terms of value, because the 3080s were never really available at that true MSRP for much longer after launch. And that's because they just ended up getting scalped. But that wasn't the last of the unfortunate launches for NVIDIA this year. The other one will come up later. We'll get back to this. And there were a lot of small disappointments to keep us occupied between January and, are we really only in February right now? Samsung's SSD firmware problems debuted on the 980 Pro and 990 Pro SSDs, at least. We don't test SSDs currently, so this story only got coverage in hardware news for us. Samsung had a big issue this year where many of their drives, including again the high-end 980 and 990 Pro units, experienced rapid wear out of the NAND due to bad firmware. This took a long time for Samsung to fix. But used GPU fraud was another one from the last year, where we saw everything from as simple as just listing cards on AliExpress or Amazon for $450 and then never shipping them, despite normally selling for $900, to more advanced scams, like taking repurposed dead mining cards and remanufacturing them into something new. When GPUs lost their usefulness for crypto mining, we noticed a collective sigh of relief from internet comments. We're getting a little bit out of order here, moving over to the next problem, and we'll come back for these. But with AI obsession, a new fever was kicked off, and it also contributed to high-end GPU shortages.
I don't know if you heard about this thing called AI.
It's all about AI.
Hey Jen, how are you?
Unfortunately, not so good.
Can you do that? I couldn't do any of that. I am the sound effect. Ray tracing and artificial intelligence at 60 frames a second.
Wow!
The year has shown us that AI isn't just kind of a cool new thing. It's actually the future of computing. Now, the key to all of this is generative AI.
So this is the word. These are the words. These are the words. I am here at Computext. I will make you like me best. Sing it with me. I really like NVIDIA.
Picasso. The role of AI, just making it go faster. But when we think about artificial intelligence,
This time, ChatGPT.
ChatGPT.
so kids, Papa's here.
The C-suite of every company is completely obsessed with AI at this point. What is he? While it's inarguable at this point that large language models and AI do have a place in the future, the level of obsession right now kind of reminds us of the early crypto mining days, where things like the high-end cards this time are the ones that have the most immediate and observable impact to price for our audience, where suddenly the 4090 has appreciated in value. We covered this in November when the average price went up to about $2,000 per card from $1,600. And that was because of the usefulness and the push behind the AI and machine learning tasks. Unfortunately, for people who are creative users or work in things like Blender, Adobe Premiere, stuff that can utilize the memory, because NVIDIA has not been putting higher capacities of memory on its next step down card like it used to, it forces you into only being able to buy something like a 4090 at these elevated prices. And actually, in our use cases, 3090s and 3090 Ti's are better than 4080s are because of the VRAM difference. So we've actually stuck to 3090s and Ti's for some of our editing machines, but on the positive side, we don't have to blow the budget on GPU support brackets for these.
Everything I'm showing today are very heavy.
Of course, the bans in China also impacted the price, but the increase in price on 4090s also affects everything below it. There's less incentive to reduce the price of cards like a 4080 when the gap against the flagship has only grown this time. That does, however, bring us to the biggest upset for the year, maybe outside of hardware, but still in gaming, and that's the games themselves. But before we focus on the disappointing ones, let's give some credit to the good one. Baldur's Gate 3 really showed everyone how it's supposed to be done. The developers shipped a functioning game, which seems like it should only make a company average, but it's actually already a huge advantage in this market. They also shipped patches with thousands of updates, including new features, accessibility improvements. Oh, and the game is actually good too, so that matters.
Who's looking forward to Starfield?
But Starfield in particular was a mess this year, and that's a fact that was maybe spoiled by AMD's top brass right before launch.
How good are the cards on Starfield?
Well, that's actually what it sounded like in response to that question, by the way. AMD had similar future sight when it came to Cities Skylines 2.
And I'm kind of excited about City Skyline 2.
And unfortunately, both games were disasters at launch. Cities Skylines 2 was barely playable on an RTX 4090 at 4K, which, considering how it looks, we also found that the developers accidentally inverted some of their graphics setting sliders, like for textures. High is low and low is high. So, great. Good. That's good. As for Starfield, it was filled with bugs ranging from failing to render stars on AMD to just overall poor performance and imbalanced settings combinations. We get the unique privilege of showing these games purely from a performance standpoint, objectively, so our job is kind of easy in that regard. We don't have to deal with any of the subjective challenges that a game reviewer might have to deal with.
It is a little something for everyone.
And on the performance side, objectively, these games were way below our expectations or the expectations of anyone else who is reasonable. And Bethesda really, in particular, should be ashamed with Starfield. And Todd Howard's response to the Game Awards made it look like they might not be self-aware enough to realize why it was ultimately problematic. We were telling NVIDIA that it unironically needs to introduce DLSS to Cities Skylines 2 because any game that looks like this could really use the help to play it. But on the upside, at least the Can It Play Crisis memes have been replaced.
I wonder if this can play Crisis.
Let's move on to the Origin disaster pre-built that we reviewed. This was part of our undercover pre-built review series, this one down here. We spent $6,600 on that computer, and unfortunately, they shipped us a machine that, out of the box, didn't even hit the stock clocks for the CPU. And that's with like $1,000 of water cooling. They've at this point said that they have things in place, so that's good. So the GN pre-built curse continues. But of course, none of this is to overshadow when I finally lost it in the beginning of this year and filmed a video about the lack of basic troubleshooting features on basically any modern motherboard that isn't over $500. The 7-segment displays was an important rant. And since I don't have any motherboard-shaped clouds to yell at today, here's a recap. 7-segment displays over the last years have completely migrated away from what used to be $200 and under motherboards. Losing that basic tier of troubleshooting support means that new consumers, especially those who are building their first system, lack the most helpful features to get their machine up and running. This has sadly become a high-end feature as motherboard makers try and pull the wool over everyone's eyes and rewrite history, making it seem like it's something special and expensive. We firmly believe that the lack of features like 7-segment display, which makes it a lot easier to troubleshoot, probably creates more RMA calls or customer support calls from people who need that help. They end up calling for basic questions like, why doesn't computer turn on? Which might be identifiable with a 2-digit code. But in either case, 7-segment displays wouldn't have saved us from the next problem that we ran into for the year, which was exploding CPUs. Holy shit, it's at 35 amps. Oh, it's on fire. Yeah, I can smell it.
Jesus Christ, 200 Celsius.
Holy shit. That's not supposed to be like that.
There's also a level of possible fuckery here that you should be aware of.
Not long after the 7800 XPD launched, reports popped up online about CPUs that were melting in the socket or burning up. And when we replicated the issue, it was a bit more dramatic than that. The silicon was heating up to a point that it actually exploded within the IHS and the substrate, evidenced by the bulging of the substrate underneath and the scorch mark inside the IHS. The problem itself was concerning enough, but AMD did well to assure customers they'd be covered under warranty. That would have been enough to put it to rest, except for ASUS, which decided to put out its own statement insinuating that the customers were at fault. Now, eventually, ASUS walked this back, and they put out a multi-step plan that talked about how they were going to fix the problem, which was great, except for how much external pressure it required to actually get that outcome. So we haven't stopped receiving emails since then about ASUS's warranty support and its RMA system just for motherboards in general, but at least with regard to the melting and exploding CPUs, we consider that to be resolved. We haven't seen any issues since the BIOS updates went out, microcode updates went out, and AMD and the board partners worked to try and fix it. But it was still really disappointing to see how it was all handled initially. And probably disappointing for people who had their CPU explode. And that brings us back to GPUs. Don't ask where I conceal carry that. 2016 called and it wants its resolution back. The RTX 4060 Ti launched as a $400 video card with a $500 variant that had some extra memory strapped to it. It went beyond being disappointing and just became disheartening because the card was marketed for 1080p gaming. This is something that the 1060 was marketed for at a cheaper price, like 6, 8, something like that years ago. And it was $500 for the 16 gigabyte one. The reason it was disheartening though is just because it felt like such a massive slide backwards in progression of what used to be the most common mid-range tier as we move towards pushing something that is considered old technology, 1080p, at crazy once flagship prices. And this was followed up by a chaotic launch from AMD's RX 7600. AMD at this point needs to be rushed to the hospital to have an emergency extraction of its foot from its mouth. But at least for AMD, the price has fallen enough where the 7600 made it into our considerations list for the best GPUs at the end of the year. Prior generations still remained better value, but as they dwindle in exit availability, the 7600 price drops to around 230 to 250 bucks during the holiday sales, at least, made it more viable. The main thing we're disappointed with AMD here about is its repeated panicked price drops basically immediately after it launches a GPU, where it'll put something out that maybe can be competitive and then makes the snap judgment to cut the price as close to the launch as possible, to the extent that it's gonna start training the consumer in a bad way. It's gonna make people expect this. On the CPU side, there were a number of disappointing CPUs this year, of course, but there were also a lot of really good launches. CPUs were probably the most promising aspect of any part of silicon for the entire year, where the 7800X3D has proven to be phenomenally efficient in workloads like gaming, and also a very strong outright performer in gaming and in some other applications. 5600X3D was pretty interesting. Intel's lower end options have remained actually completely viable, keeping the budget segment alive, like with the 12100F, despite not being new. It's still available for pretty cheap, and it's valid right now. So there've been a lot of promising aspects, but on the less appealing side, AMD's 7900X3D definitely makes that list because it is so forgettable that we didn't remember it existed until going back through the entire year's launches to make this video. So it was one of those. They've had those in the past, like with the XT refreshes. So 7900X3D definitely was a letdown because it had a chance, but just really didn't deliver compared to the alternatives. And then, of course, Intel's 14 series, can't really call it a generation. We do it out of habit a lot, but the 14 series, massively disappointing, but especially the 14700K, because that one actually had a core count difference. It just didn't materialize into anything useful, unfortunately. And speaking of, we had Intel's snake oil to close out the year. They got it in just in time to make it into this video.
Snake oil?
Intel chose some really odd places to take shots with this one. It explained AMD's naming scheme really well, actually, but then it forgot to define its own CPUs. This one was honestly just completely bizarre and way out of character for Intel. Between the used car salesman slide, which it's on the screen, if you didn't see it, you really should check it out, because this came from a company that is worth hundreds of billions of dollars. And then it had the snake oil slide as well. And we genuinely did check if this was real multiple times, as we said when I was standing in front of their campus filming, and it was real. And for a company that is as put together as Intel, where everything goes through a million layers to get anywhere, normally this kind of stuff doesn't make it out. So for that to get published, it was really unexpected. We hope that Intel can get back into the fight properly soon, because AMD right now, they're very competitive, was not always that way. And even in early Ryzen, I mean, it was close there for a little bit. Intel would come back out swinging after a big AMD push. And that's what we need now, because AMD is not going to keep offering CPUs with as good value as a 5800X3D if they don't have any competitive reasoning to. So Intel needs to get into that fight, but doing the whole used car salesman slide thing was a nice ending note for the disappointments of the year. Let's briefly talk about some positives. So to end on a positive note, there were a lot of really great product releases this year as well. So coolers have done phenomenally in the air cooler segment again, where continually the performance is improving, the prices are coming down for air coolers, and they're getting really good, which is awesome to see. Liquid coolers are also getting pretty advanced now, and the prices are generally more affordable if you don't go super heavy on the LCDs and RGB and all that stuff. So clearly this is one of the strongholds for value. CPUs also, again, really good overall for the year, despite the 7900X3D, despite the 14 series. This is one of the healthier aspects of the market right now, especially compared to GPUs. GPUs in some areas, like the 7900XT, have finally become actually really appealing, depending on if it's still at that $700 to $750 price point that we saw during Black Friday and a little before that. And then at the low end, we have Intel with the RK750, 7600's kind of becoming more viable with its price drops as well. So there are good parts that are kind of scattered throughout every segment, but coolers, cases in particular, those have both been incredibly strong. And cases we're looking forward to jumping back into for reviews. On the GPU side, it does seem like things are settling down now. So the year started out wild with the 4070 Ti. Like, that was completely crazy what NVIDIA was marketing. They toned it down a little bit, but obviously we're still missing the mark with the 4060 Ti. AMD kind of started kicking it into gear towards the end of the year as well. We saw some of the price resets recently. You know, it was just sales. Hopefully those stick. But it's at least starting to go the right direction, and that's because of the pain that they've been in from not being able to sell their static inventory. The next couple weeks will really show us where the GPU makers are for mindset right now, though, because that's when NVIDIA's refreshes are supposed to come out and some of AMD's new parts. Handheld market's also been really exciting, with it suddenly booming with new options as manufacturers experiment and try out designs, so we're excited to see what that segment does. But we already published a lot of positive best roundups for the year, so you should check those out if you want some high notes for 2023. There'll always be disappointing parts in a year. It helps to contextualize them, to just go back through it all, and it's kind of fun because it really helps reset us as reviewers. For GN, you know, we have a lot of new testing that we just finalized methodologically, so just briefly for the audience, for those of you who care, we're excited to roll into the next year. The next few weeks, we'll be posting some of our new testing methods. So we have threaded for coolers that we've started testing. We have a big roundup for that. We have new cooler testing methods, new case methods, and then we've got some GPU stuff going up as well. So a lot of reworks over the past few months that are finally going to get published, and that'll be a heavy month for us in January with a lot of component reviews, which brings us back to what a lot of you like the most from us, but we're going to keep posting some of these factory tours as educational content on Saturdays until we run out of them. And that's been one of the big things we're really hoping to do in 2024, where I'd like to do a lot more of that educational content. And this is something, you know, working with Patrick Stone, where we outfitted his class recently. We have a video on that with a bunch of components for a computer engineering class in a high school. But working with him specifically was a great reminder of, like, oh, this is, if our factory tours or our educational content get used in an environment like that, like a classroom, I mean, that's awesome. That's kind of what we really want to start expanding on is, you know, the reviews, we try to make them informational and educational to the extent that it makes sense or that it helps with the product. But we don't really try to make like anything that's necessarily meaningful outside of the value of that product when talking about the product. It's all kind of self-contained, and you watch it for the review, you buy it or you don't, you move on. So we're separating out some of that educational stuff to be more long-term referential, which is what the Factory Tour series is kind of exploring. So you'll see more of that from us in 24, but we're also picking back up on the component reviews now that we've totally rebuilt all the cooler and case benches. Other fun stuff, you're gonna see more guest appearances from people. So Wendell's popped up. We talked about the future being PCIe. Bill and Amit from AMD have been awesome guests. We're super informative and really great for discussion on the technology side. And then people like Malcolm from NVIDIA on the thermal engineering side. That kind of content where we actually have a lot of it lined up going up, even in the next week, actually, you'll see some of it pop up. So you see more of that. But for GN, I'd say those are the big focuses for us coming up this year. Anyway, we're excited for all that. And I'd say on the educational material, if you have specific things you want to learn about, let us know, because we're going to be working on more of those as sort of regular entries to our video upload scheduling that decouples the educational aspect from the more transient product value aspect, because I'd say, you know, one of the biggest compliments we can get is when someone like Patrick Stone uses a factory tour in his teaching for technology. So that's it for this one. It was a lot of fun doing this video, as always. Great way to get it all out of our system and move on into a fresh year for components. And thank you all for supporting us for another year. We look forward to seeing you in the next couple videos. You can subscribe for more, as always. Go to store.gamersnexus.net or patreon.com/gamersnexus. Helps out directly. And we'll see you all next time.